One man. Goodbye. Hello, Heisman.
20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, 45. There goes Davis. Oh, my God. Davis is going to run it all the way back. Auburn's going to win the football game.
They give it back now to the 30. They're down to the 20. All the band is out on the field. He's going to go into the end zone.
Four-man Alabama rush. Got him. Oh, no, they didn't. Oh, my gracious.
Yep.
How about that?
Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Three Technique, the college football podcast at the intersection of the X's and O's and the Jimmies and the Joes. It's a YouTube exclusive, and I am joined by Matt Blackwell of the Crimson Captain, covering all things Oklahoma Sooners. And Matt, this week I'm sure has been very calm, very regular, nothing crazy going on in your neck of the woods.
Yeah, completely boring when it comes to covering OU this week. Nothing really going on, nothing surprising. No palace intrigue of any sort, so yeah, just very, very ho-hum, very chill.
Of course, just about nothing has been regular this week. We're wondering if John Mateer is going to play. We just had the injury report come out, the initial injury report. We'll talk about that in just a second. Oklahoma has not practiced outside so far this week. It's been closed door meetings only for the Sooners. So let's start off the top with the question that everybody is wondering. What is currently the latest on John Mateer and his status for Saturday against Texas?
Well, I think that is the question that is filling my DMs. I know every single person who has any kind of connection to this team is being asked, probably 100 times a day at minimum about what the status of John Mateer is. I think it's has to be the most famous thumb in college football at this point. I think if you listen to the coaches talk, if you listen to what people in and around the program are saying, there's a lot of optimism that he can play, but the real answer is nobody knows what's going to happen, because even if he is throwing the football, which the team has not confirmed really any details around what he's doing in practice and what that's looking like. Even if he is able to practice, you don't know how that's going to respond day to day, and you don't know what that's going to look like on Saturday. So even if they are pushing for it, like has been publicly reported, even if that's the plan, like we know is the case, there's a lot of variables there that can still come into play. And we're not really, as trite as it might be to say, it's not what everybody wants to hear, but we're not going to know exactly what's going to happen until kickoff on Saturday.
And that seems to be kind of the way that Brent Venables would probably like it to be, right? I mean, as tough of a hand as he was dealt when the injury came about, he also now holds some of the cards, as Texas has to assume, I think, that John Mateer is going to play, or at least prep for both quarterbacks. So in your mind, between Mateer and Michael Hawkins, the backup, does that give Oklahoma some sort of advantage going into Saturday in Red River?
I think it can. I know Venables and the staff are really scratching for any kind of advantage that they can get. And so if there is one to be had in trying to obfuscate and be coy about what's going on, or not provide any kind of clarity on what the plan is, then they are really driving for that. I think there could be, in the sense that in a conference where the margin of victory, the margin for error is really small, if you are able to gain an advantage and make somebody spend a few extra minutes in practice preparing for one quarterback versus another, then that could work to your advantage at some point. It's really hard to quantify that, I think, and know just what kind of an advantage, or if one exists for sure. But I think it's safe to say that OU is erring on the side of working to make sure that it does exist, or they do have that if there is an advantage to be gained.
Yeah, Mateer listed as questionable on the injury report that was released just a few minutes ago as we record this. Kind of the perfect non-answer, right? It's the 50-50. Could play, could not play. We'll learn more as we get closer to that game. The line opened up in a weird spot, I think, for most college football fans. Texas, after laying an egg in the swamp, looking really hapless on defense, more so even than the offensive side, opened up as a 3.5 point favorite. Now that line has swung drastically, I believe, as of time of recording on Monday, or I'm sorry, on Wednesday night. It is an Oklahoma -1.5 line. Did that line shock you as much as it did me when it was first released?
When it was first released, I thought they were making the assumption that Hawkins was playing. I think I saw something yesterday, though, where I think it was from FanDuel. It could be wrong. But I think FanDuel put something out that said that their initial line was based on Mateer playing. That has since obviously moved, and
Yeah.
that's, so take that for what you will. But it did surprise me. I think, especially knowing that Vegas has a way of knowing things that the rest of us don't when it comes to how these things will unfold. It was a little surprising for that line to be where it was. I think that there's some other things that they're taking into account besides the quarterback. They're looking at things like the offensive line's performance against Kent State last week and the injuries that they've had there, and the struggles that OU has had in the run game, as well as some of the big plays that they've given up in the secondary. Because when you go back and look at their previous games, they played an Auburn team that had been struggling offensively going into that game. And Jackson Arnold was able to find receivers open downfield more than once. OU was actually really pretty fortunate that Arnold didn't connect on more. He overthrew, I think it was 2 or 3 open receivers that had gotten behind the defense there. So I would imagine, Vegas and even some of the national guys who have picked OU or picked Texas rather today, like J.D. Pickell and Josh Pate, they're taking all that into account as well. So I kind of get it, just thinking about it or thinking it through, I guess, when looking at the line. But there's a lot of different things that we just don't know which version of OU is going to show up, I think. And that's really the big variable in my mind.
It's a good point, and I do want to circle back to the defense because there are some questions that I have, as you mentioned, about the secondary and maybe preventing the big play that Texas kind of seems like they need just to move the football, just to find the end zone. But take me to the offense, and with or without John Mateer, my biggest concern about Oklahoma has been the lack of a running game that you just alluded to. So take it with Mateer at starting quarterback, with Hawkins at quarterback. What does Oklahoma need to do a better job of to move the football on the ground against the Longhorns on Saturday morning?
The first thing they need the offensive line, or the version of it that showed up against Michigan, versus the one that showed up against Kent State. And against Michigan, that was by far the healthiest that offensive line had been. You had really good performances by some young players in Michael Pasusi and Hito Zaida, and the new center that they had in that game, Jake Michaela. You need that version of OU's offensive line to show up, because that version did really well against a defensive line at Michigan that has a lot of future NFL guys on it. So if you get that line versus Texas, versus the one that you saw against Kent State, which couldn't pass block to save their lives, let alone get a running game going, then I think that puts them in a really good spot. Barring that, though, and outside of that, I think they need Jaden Ott to get going, and they need Torrey Blaylock to be the best version of himself. And if you get those ingredients at play, then I think that gives OU a chance to perhaps win by more than what some people would expect, if they were to struggle in the run game like they have most of the year.
Texas, their offensive line couldn't block at all, pass block, run block, what have you. The defensive line got gashed at times on the ground by Florida's attack. Jaden Baugh had himself a whale of a ball game. And so on one hand, I think you could say, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of hope here that Oklahoma could figure something out. Why hasn't Jaden Ott been more of a factor in the Oklahoma offense? Is he still hurt and kind of nagging with an injury, or is it just been that, quite frankly, he hasn't earned that playing time?
I think it's a combination of of him getting fully back to 100%, and also just getting the practice reps that he needs to gain the confidence of DeMarco Murray. I think those are finally all coming together for him over the last 2 or 3 weeks. Ben Arbuckle in his press conference this week alluded to Jaden Ott really coming on within that time frame over the last 2.5 weeks or so. So I think it's a combination of both for sure with Ott. And from my perspective, if the offensive line can get back to that form against Michigan, and they can get Ott going along with the complementary work of Torrey Blaylock, that could unlock the running game in a way that we haven't seen yet. And it wouldn't be, when you look at OU's past teams over the years, it generally takes them a few weeks to get the running game going and unlock the combination on the offensive line and the cohesiveness there, in conjunction with finding that running back who can work really well with how that particular offensive line operates before they really get going. And I think that's the hope on the OU side, is that this is the week where it really comes together for the first time in a major way.
Say that Michael Hawkins has to play and that he's quarterback once again for the Red River Shootout. What does Oklahoma's ideal game plan look like for him, for the Sooners to come out on top?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the biggest thing for Hawkins is he needs to be efficient in the passing game. He needs to be accurate and make the layups, the easy throws, which he had some difficulty doing against Kent State. And he's going to need others to step up around him. He's going to need the offensive line to play well. He's going to need the running backs to produce, and he's going to have to make good choices in the QB run game. So if you can get those, and then avoid the big mistake, right, like the interception, or and really not even a turnover so much as just making the wrong read that leads to a missed third down or something along those lines, and just be smart and be efficient. The degree of difficulty for OU goes up pretty significantly, I think, if Hawkins does have to play, because Hawkins is not going to be as much of a threat in the passing game and be able to keep the Texas defense honest in ways that I think they're really going to have to, if they're going to be successful in the run game. So the extent to which Hawkins can be smart in the pass game, make good decisions in the run game, and avoid the big mistake would be the key for OU in that scenario.
It seems like if there is a guy, though, that could scheme up an offensive game plan to make a kid like Hawkins feel comfortable in a big rivalry scenario against Texas, it's Ben Arbuckle, right? Quick, fast athletes getting in space, finding a way to just use their natural athleticism to their fullest extent. I feel like that's what kind of missed from Oklahoma's game plan in the last 2 of 3 years in Red River, where they got blown out with less than stellar quarterback play, obviously. So I'm curious to see who trots out there. If it is Hawkins, what can they do differently this year to get him comfortable, make this more of a game? Let's switch over to the defensive side, though, because in my opinion, this is the biggest mismatch suddenly on the field. Oklahoma's front seven against a Texas offensive line that right now doesn't look like they could stop a nosebleed when they're playing against great competition. And Florida's pass rush had their way with that unit last week. Arch had nothing going for him. Couldn't sit in the pocket, couldn't scan downfield, had no running lanes whatsoever. So talk to me about Oklahoma's pass rush kind of licking their chops against Texas, but also realizing maybe someone, in this case, the Longhorns offensive line, isn't as bad as their worst day. What are kind of your expectations going into Saturday morning?
It is definitely the biggest mismatch between any unit or two units that will be on the field on Saturday. And I think there was some surprise about how Florida was able to operate against the Texas offensive line, because if I'm remembering correctly, the Florida defensive line was not highly regarded or highly ranked, had not had a lot of success going into that game. And so the level to which they were able to dominate that game was definitely a surprise. And then you compare that to what OU is going to bring to the table, and it's a welcome to the NFL moment in terms of the difference, I think, in what OU's bringing versus what Texas has seen so far this year outside of maybe Ohio State. And I don't expect Texas to have any success really running the ball. The question I have on defense for OU is more about their communication on the defensive side of the ball in general, because Brent Venables likes to get the play calls in late and trying to get into that perfect call every single play. And so if OU on the defensive line has done a really good job processing that information and then turning that into a high level of play on the defensive line, where you could get into trouble. The thing that I'm going to be watching is can the entire OU defense do that? But I really, going back to your question, I really think that the OU defensive line has to play up to their potential. They have to win this matchup in the way that everybody expects them to, because if Arch does have time and they are able to run the ball at all, then that could open the door for Texas to have success in the passing game, at least. Again, I don't have any expectation that Texas will be able to run the ball. If they did, it would be a major surprise.
Yeah, 10 yards last week against Florida. And you're right. I mean, Florida's defensive line, very talented, had some injuries, but had not produced those kinds of results whatsoever. And, whether Florida is just a miracle team at home versus on the road, we'll certainly get to see that as they go to College Station this week. But concerning, to say the least, for Texas heading into this game against a very physical, talented defensive front from the Sooners. I think the biggest concern, question mark maybe, for the Sooners defense, as you alluded to earlier, is the secondary's propensity to give up some big plays. And it feels like if Texas is going to move the ball, Arch has gotten some of the deep balls going. He's also missed a couple, but those wide receivers are running open in the secondary quite frequently. What does Oklahoma have to do to keep up with a talented group of Texas wide receivers and prevent Arch from really putting this game on his right shoulder?
So for me, the biggest key when it comes to OU secondary, and this is something that I've talked about with people who know a whole lot more about football than I do, at the coaching level and scouting level. And it goes back to what I was talking about just a minute ago in terms of Brent Venables liking to get the calls in late to try and get the perfect set against whatever look is being presented offensively. They've had some communication issues in the secondary when those calls come in late, and that's led to some of the free runners that you've seen. I don't think that's true in every case, but that's definitely been an issue on the back end for OU. And to me, that's really the biggest key from my side of it, because Steve Sarkisian is very good at noticing a weakness that a team has defensively and then trying to exploit that. And he's watched that Auburn tape where OU could not defend the go ball. They had trouble defending the deep post. Basically, a scenario where the corners and safeties have to work together to understand what covers they're in and hand guys off, or whatever the case may be. There was a consistent struggle for OU against Auburn, and it showed up in other games as well, where the pass was open, but teams just haven't been able to connect on it. If you give Texas a chance where they're max protecting and they give Arch 3 or 4 seconds, I could see a problem arising for OU where there's a miscommunication in the secondary somewhere. Somebody's misaligned, or somebody hands off, is playing zone when they should be playing man, or something like that. And you get an opportunity for a big play, and it'll come down to whether Arch can connect on it or not. That to me is really the big question for OU, is can they play a clean game in the secondary? Can they align properly? Can they communicate well? And can those corners and safeties work together in tandem?
This crazy stupid sport that we call college football, man, it never fails to deliver. This week has been as kooky and unique as I can remember heading into a rivalry game. I think it's just perfect for Red River. So the only thing we have left to do is get your thoughts on the final score. Got to assume that you feel confident about Oklahoma being the more complete team at this point, but if you were forced to pick a final score, what would you say?
So I think it's going to be a low scoring affair. I think I put something on Twitter earlier today that the first team to 75 rushing yards from a non QB could win.
Yeah.
I think that's probably that could definitely be the case, but no, a final score somewhere in the 17-7 range for OU, and I think Mateer ends up playing again. I don't know that, can't claim some special knowledge on that front, but I think he does play. I think OU's defense um, is who we think they are in this scenario, and OU ends up winning a fairly close one, but they end up winning by 2 scores.
I like it. I like it a lot. If Mateer does get to play, will you build the tortilla presser a statue on campus?
Oh, absolutely. He'll get his own statue next to Bob Stoops 100%. I don't think there's any question about it.
I would love to see that. Out of all the things that we've done in the 4+ years of this show, breaking that news to the college football public, I think might be up there at the very top of what we've done. Matt, it's been a pleasure getting to talk football with you. Best of luck for your Sooners. Let the fans know that are watching this for the first time, finding us for the first time, finding you for the first time, where they can read and see more of your work.
You can find us at crimsoncaptain.com. My Twitter or X handle is cap_405. And same on Instagram and other places as well. So thanks for having me on. It's been great.
Awesome. Absolute pleasure. Best of luck this weekend. It is going to be another fantastic week of college football. To the Jimmies and Joes, we appreciate you hanging out with with us on YouTube here today. For Matt Blackwell, I'm Mitch Mason. Thanks so much. And until next time, so long, everybody.